Okay, so welcome to the G7 final press conference. After the release of the G7 leader communique yesterday. So today we're going to evaluate the G7 leaders communique 2023 according to the policy asks from 6 different G7 working groups, and also voices from local civil society in Hiroshima, and also the C7. By the way, my name is Aoi Horiuchi. I'm a C7 steering committee member and also a C7 secretary. I'm from the Japan International Corporations. So basically, we are going to evaluate in 5 levels, 5 grades. From disappointed, which is heavy rain, and rain, and moderate is cloudy, and satisfied, cloudy or partly sunny, and very satisfied is sunny. So according to those 5 ways, each working groups will have already prepared the evaluations, and we are going to ask all the coordinators and also colleagues from CV7 to stand up and show your evaluation first, so that we can take photos together. So please stand up, and we will show the result by 3, 2, 1, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Come through. Okay. Ready? Ready? Okay.
Yes.
3, 2, 1. Yes. How was it? Rain, cloudy, heavy rain, cloudy, heavy rain, partly sunny, rain, but sun is shining. Okay, good. Okay, so thank you. Thank you for this done. Japanese. Okay, so I will give you 3 minutes for your presentations. How you evaluate the leaders communicate according to your policy recommendations. And to begin with, Sumiko Takayama, who is a coordinator of C7 nuclear disarmament working groups. So Sumiko, you have 3 minutes.
Yes. So for the nuclear disarmament, on the topic of nuclear disarmament, we have evaluated that what the G7 leaders come up with is disappointment. So it's evaluated at 2 out of 5. And so, this time the G7 summit is held in Hiroshima, which is a very symbolic city where the atomic bomb was dropped 78 years ago in 1945. And really, honestly speaking, a lot of the survivors had high hope in getting some words, some concrete and positive promise for disarmament coming out of this place. However, really the summit communique does not even call for the abolition of nuclear weapons. The communique only makes excuses for not advancing nuclear disarmament, saying that a world without nuclear weapons is the ultimate goal, and that a realistic, practical, and responsible approach should be taken, ensuring undiminished security for all. And really what we got in the leader's statement fails to present a credible alternative vision involving new steps to actual disarmament. The Civil 7 recommended starting negotiations for the elimination of nuclear weapons within a set time frame, but the G7 leaders have shown no such attitude. In their statement on nuclear disarmament, they condemned Russia's nuclear response, saying that those are for defensive and deterrence purposes. What exactly did the G7 leaders feel when they visited Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum and met with Hibakusha? Was there any purpose, any reason for this summit to have been held in Hiroshima? I must say, with really deep regret, that this city that experienced a nuclear catastrophe has been disgraced by the senseless leaders who affirm nuclear weapons. So that's the reason for the rainfall.
Thank you, Sumiko. So we should have spoken, by the way. We have produced this C7 communique in April and submitted to the Prime Minister Kishida, who is the G7 president today, and he is actually around there to make a final concluding press conference in front of the atomic bomb dome and also his memory museum. So, and nuclear disarmament working group was established for the first time this year, based on the strong voices and recommendations from local civil society and also Japanese civil societies, because G7 will be held in Hiroshima. So, unfortunately, it rains over Hiroshima. Okay, so the next speaker, Lisa Endo, who is the coordinator of Climate and Environmental Justice Working Group. So please show your revelation. You have 3 minutes. Yes.
Sorry. Thank you, Awe-san, and good afternoon. I'm Lisa Endo from C7 Climate and Environmental Justice Working Group coordinators. For this working group, I put proudly the moderate evaluation, but of course I know it depends on what issues that each working group member focusing on, but this is my evaluation from the perspective of climate change, and particularly the first 3, it is urgently necessary to strengthen the adaptation and loss and damage measures for those who are disproportionately affected by climate change, and what are included in G7 Hiroshima leaders communique as follows are important. Continuing to scale up and enhance support to strengthen the resilience of climate vulnerable groups through enhancing climate change adaptation and climate disaster risk reduction, response and recovery and early warning system, and scaling up action and support to avert, minimize and address loss and damage, especially for the most vulnerable countries. And implementing the UNFCCC COP27 CMA4 decision on loss and damage to establish new funding arrangement, including a fund for developing countries that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change, and continuing to accelerate efforts to respond to the Glasgow Climate Pact that urges developed countries to at least double their collective provision of climate finance for adaptation to developing countries from the 2090s level by 2025. And secondly, about 1/3 of global GHG emissions are from sources other than energy-derived CO2 emissions, and it is urgently necessary to reduce other GHG emissions together with the reduction of energy-derived CO2 emissions. So regarding enhancing the ambition and submission of NDCs, including all GHG is mentioned in G7 Hiroshima leaders communique. So I think this is very important. And in addition, it is also stated that the affirming G7's commitment to the global methane and stepping up efforts to collectively reduce global anthropogenic methane emissions. Although the supporting developing countries' just energy transition and expanding renewable energy globally are included, but some statements about energy, such as fossil fuels, are far from the outcomes recommended by our working group members. So this is for my evaluation. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So the climate, we see climate environment changing, but it's moderate, but we see some disappointment. Okay, so the next speaker is Shoko Uchida, who is a coordinator of Economic Justice and Transformation Working Group. And you have 3 minutes as well.
Okay, so hello everybody. I'm Shoko Uchida from the Economic Justice and Transformation Working Group. We, the Economic Justice Working Group, rated the G7 communique as the lowest heavy rain. And in the past few years, multiple global crises have hit people's lives, including COVID-19 pandemic, the war in Ukraine, energy and food insecurity, and etc. Today, these are the results of contradiction and problems in the global economy promoted over the past 15 years. And these rules have been formulated mainly by the G7 countries. So we expected complete commitment to address these issues. But in reality, most of them are either statements of expectations for the G20 or are ineffective and do not fulfill the responsibilities of the G7 itself. So for example, look at the urgent issue of developing countries that issues. According to the World Bank, the outstanding external debt of low and middle income countries will exceed to 9.2 trillion US dollar in 2021. Around 60 countries are among those in potential default due to the debt. So it's very, very serious. But the Communique does not discuss the debt cancellation proposed by civil society, but only points to a solution in the G20-led common framework for debt restructuring. So in contrast, economic security come very much to the fore at this G7. This is the first time that economic insecurity session has been established at the G7, and the G7 leaders' statement, economic resilience and economic security was also issued. Here, China is accused of market destroying behavior, etc., and so the really strong phrases. The aim is to decouple the supply chain of strategic goods and mineral resources such as the semiconductors, etc. And from China, while incorporating the global south. But such decoupling will further impose environmental and social burdens, especially on developing countries, we think. So above all, we are concerned that this is the direction that will fragment and block the global economy. So finally, we have to rate the lowest rank. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Shoko. We know that the debt issue is quite huge, but unfortunately, G7 leaders have not mentioned about those. So thank you. So the next speaker is Masaki Inaba, the coordinator of Global Health Working Group. So please show you. Wait.
Okay. Our Global Health Working Group, we put the training as a kind of to evaluate the outcome of the global health outcomes of the G7. G7, the good G7 global health process, which was supposed to go beyond the COVID-19 to ensure full preparedness for the possible new pandemic, carried high expectations and the efforts of many people, but unfortunately ended in disappointment, partly because there were insufficient time to develop G7-wide initiatives on health, and partly because of the limitation and the constraint that Japan and other G7 countries have. As for pandemic preparedness, the G7 failed to address intellectual property rights, which are one of the main causes of the global disparity of vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. And the mechanism that was supposed to aim at equitable access to medicines has been limited to rely on the voluntary cooperation of the pharmaceutical companies and industries. The Hiroshima summit missed an opportunity to move from monopoly to sharing, from competition to cooperation, which was essential to achieve equitable access of MCMs. Other issues were also touched on comprehensively, but the G7 most sought after financial and technological contributions were not presented, and most of the pledges were orders to other platforms or rehashing of previous, repeating of the previous pledges So we expect further process of global initiatives led by WHO and also other global initiatives, multilateral initiatives, not G7. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Masaki. Okay, the global situation, we see that although the COVID pandemic seems to be over, but not. And we also need to prepare the next and also strengthen the global applications. Okay, so the next speaker is Yuko Shibata, coordinator of humanitarian assistance and conflict working group. So please, you have the 3 minutes.
Thank you. For us, we rated as cloudy. Well, first of all, we welcome $21 billion in total was committed to address humanitarian crisis, including food crisis. It is also welcomed the support for education, which Japanese civil society have been specifically advocating, is recognized and mentioned and as a separate issue is welcomed. And also, we have strong voice from a working group is to reduce the humanitarian needs. So we're also glad to see the commitment for international disaster risk reduction cooperation in line with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction and strengthening the anticipatory actions. So now I said all positive aspect, but you may wonder why it's cloudy, not sunny. There's 3 reasons that I would rate it as a cloudy. One is, well, overall, most of issues we have been raised is in the civil communique was recognized, mentioned. However, these are very vague and there's no concrete actions or commitment. And also, it says that $210 billion was committed. However, what the important thing is the details, how it's spent, how will be spent, and who will be benefited. And these are not specified. I'm not sure how it's going to be specified. And last reason is the local actions and leadership is not mentioned, which is a really important factors to implement those humanitarian actions, even in those committed amounts. So it's those 3 reasons that why it's rated as a criteria. So we're hoping that the more clear and actionable commitment will be coming to move forward to a new era of humanitarian assistance system.
Thank you. Yes. Although the G7 agenda is partly hijacked by Zelensky's visit, sudden visit, but we also see the need for the humanitarian assistance, not only in Ukraine, but also all over the world. Thank you. So the next speaker is Hirotaka Koike, coordinator of G7 Open Region Societies Working Group. You have 3 minutes as well.
Thank you. Thank you for joining this session today. My name is Hirotaka Koike, Open Society, Resilient and Open Society Working Group Coordinator. G7 failed to show the strong commitment to the civic space and also the open society, and this is a proof that they are putting the double standard in its narrative. On the one hand, they're claiming that they support rule of law and democracy across the world, and yet on the other, they show little to zero commitment how to protect the civic space, increase freedom of speech, or protect the whistleblowers as well. On G7 Communique, we have been advocating the protection of the civic space, increase digital democracy, protection of human rights, and other issues. So I would like to touch upon those things. On democracies, the communique touched upon very little about it, and most of the paragraph was dedicated to the digital information warfare with other countries, namely Russia. And most of the contents were primarily targeting manipulations, information warfare from others, and yet zero discussion on how they are doing that at home. which means they think that they are doing fine, but that is not the case. And the increased online and offline harassment of the activists, limited spaces for the freedom of speech and thought. Also, the freedom of academia have been quite reduced recently, and Japan is part of that. So this is quite double standards that they're putting out. They had opportunity to just show the commitment by issuing similar statements like last 2 years. In Edinburgh and Cornwall, they had open society statement and a resilient democracy statement, and yet they decided not to issue. That is rather showcasing their, a negligence of these issues and also seriousness about addressing these critical challenges that we face. On participations in International Media Center, this G7 wasn't a great example. I would say this isn't meeting the standard of international conferences. They didn't provide a spaces for the NGOs within the International Media Center. They also removed our only board that showed the schedule of this NGO center there without prior communications. So this shows how inclusive they are. And if they like to continue, that's fine, but they shouldn't claim that they are supporting civil society. In the leaders' communique, they say they are going to support and listen to civil society. So I'd like to see the G7 would walk the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiro. Thank you for the comment. And we have just seen that the double sevens and the plus seven the compass, and they are not actually inspired with the community, but we can also hear from their perspectives as well. Okay, so those are the 6 working groups evaluation and disabilities communicates. But we also have 2 more speakers. One, Hiroki Matsubara, who is a C7 Steering Committee member, as well as director of Hiroshima Info Center. So, keep it in Hiroshima. You have many roles. So please go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Hiroki Matsubara from the Civil 7th Steering Committee and Hiroshima Info Center. As a student of Hiroshima, I feel that holding the G7 summit in Hiroshima is of great significance. Firstly, I'd like to show my gratitude for Prime Minister Kishida, who has served as a G7 president. It can be appreciated that the visit to the Peace Memorial Park of G7 leaders include nuclear power was realized. I am also grateful for my fellow civil society members, students of Hiroshima who have worked together, the media who brought our voice to the government and to the world, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who supported our activities. I don't believe that anyone knows exactly what the proper outcome of the G7 summit is. However, from the perspective of civil society, I believe that every one of us did have something to learn and realize through the G7 Hiroshima summit. In this sense, it was a precious opportunity for us to learn social issues and diversity. As a member of the G7 Steering Committee, I strongly insist that a civil society has something that we only can do to resolve. It bears great importance that those involved in the politics and civil society cooperate with each other. With such background, the latest G7 leaders' declaration seems only for politics and exclude civil society. Honestly speak, I can help but to think that for what proposed and outcome that G7 summit is being held. After the summit is over, as citizen of Hiroshima and as member of an NGO, we will be connect, conti, con, we will be continuously working towards the realization of a world without nuclear weapon and sustainable society. Thank you.
Thank you, Hiroki. Yes, yes, this is a historic day that the leaders will gather in Hiroshima, but we shouldn't stop here because G7 leaders will once again meet in Italy next year in Parigi. The Meloni has just mentioned Parigi, the southern part of Italy. So we definitely need to ask the leaders' government to continue discussing the nuclear disarmament issues as well, so that civil society will also continue our discussions as well. So after all the 7 speakers, now last but not the least, Mariko Kina will be concluding the C7's evaluations, the whole evaluation of the G7 leadership. So Mariko, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for your kind interest that section. I thought you forgot my name.
No, I thought last but not least, I wanted to say that I just forgot.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. My name is Mariko. I'm a member of the steering committee of the C7 and also the co-chair with Matsubara-san for the Japanese Coalition for C7 Policies. And we are so grateful to have so many people here in this room. Thank you very much for coming. And as a overall rating, after having heard of those, from my colleagues here, I have to say, as far as overall rating is concerned, I can give only 2, the rating and the average for the 6 working groups. And what are the specific reasons for this, poor evaluation from the working groups is different, in accordance with their own perspectives. But I have to say that the result is such because the summit declaration does not adequately or sufficiently reflect the voice of the citizens. And in other words, it is not very clear while the G7 policy is to be made based on the declaration from now on, that will change the society to be peaceful and inclusive for all. So the role of the C7, along with the other engagement groups, I believe, is to provide perspectives of the G governments to not harm. The C7, as has been doing so far, is continuously, and will have to continue, asking whether the policies of the 7 countries will truly lead to the realization of the society where no one left behind. By expanding and deepening this engagement process, we hope that whether this weather progress will turn to sunny from rainy or at least cloudy. This is our hope that by having a more valuable and meaningful dialogue with the government and then also other stakeholders, we go towards the sun. That is my hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariko. Yes, thank you for your comment. And now we have about 20 minutes for Q&A sessions. So I'd like to open the floor, the questions from colleagues and the journalists in the floor. And please raise your hand if you have questions and comments. And please specify who you want to ask and your name and your organization as well. So any comments from the floor? Okay, please.
Yes, my name is Lori Washington. I'm outside Associated Bank.
The question to Koike.
Yes.
So to see this G7 progress, I really feel it's a very critical time for civil society. The civil society power is very, very important now. So what is the best strategy to empower ourselves?
Thank you. Okay, Zero, you have the first.
I don't know. I don't think there's only one way, but I think it's going to be quite crucial that we continue this coalition and the coalescing around topics. This time, so my organization, which is Greenpeace, work in the climate and the environment. We don't usually work with NGOs such as on health, development, human rights, and so on. So this kind of coalition building, the network building, would be very crucial in the moving forward, because the issue becoming more than ever interconnected, and one single organization cannot solve it or address it alone. And we need all expertise to be involved in order to provide quality inputs by the civil society. So that definitely is one. And another thing is we need to continue to have solidarity as a core issue. I think without having a concrete idea who we are going to show solidarity with, it's going to fail. And it's not just G7. We are not trying to help G7. We are trying to ensure that G7 won't harm the world and ensure that people suffering from it will be relieved from it. So we have to be very clear who we are working for, and that kind of question needs to continuously happening in this space. Thank you.
Thank you. What is the special point for Japanese civil society?
Is the question to Hiro or Hiro? Both. Hiroki.
Okay.
Hiro. Okay, Hiro. Hiro first. Hiroki second. From Hiroshima. No. Who you want to ask?
Oh, to all.
Okay, to everyone. As
encourage.
I think yeah, especially the next year when the G7 goes to Italy, and suddenly, usually the people, Japanese civil society, may disappear. They should focus on their own things, not the G7 itself. So that's actually what happened 7 years ago, you know.
Yeah.
So how should we can continue our discussions? So please make your short answer to questions one by one. Anyone?
What's your question?
How to empower the Japanese civil societies in order to have any strategy to involve probably Japanese civil societies more. And maybe Hiroki, you can also speak about local civil society in Hiroshima, and your each topic has specific issues. Do you imagine if you can continually work the same issues as this year in 2024? Can you imagine the futures? Okay, so that's kind of question that's actually posed. So anyone, do you want to answer her questions or did you make a comment?
I want to create a context for that kind of discussion.
Okay, good.
It's nice to have these snapshots of the current weather, but I think it's also important to know the trend. Because I think you're on the disarmament field where I'm primarily expert. I could almost agree with the umbrella. But if you look at how would you have evaluated the Bali summit of the G20, that was partly sunny. And so the weather's getting worse. And we need to keep that in perspective if we're going to turn things around. I had a way of evaluating the particular issue of nuclear weapon threats. And I said, it's on your desk. I said, let's compare statements.
Compare.
And I call the Vienna Declaration of the TPNW states parties the gold standard. Because we condemn unequivocally any and all threats, whatever way, whether they be explicit or implicit, and irrespective of the circumstances. That really covers it. Okay, now in Bali, they said something which I suppose logically is as equivalent to the first, but it doesn't pin it down quite so much. It says the use and the threat of the use of nuclear weapons is inadmissible. That's a strong word. It means here's a civilized society and there's a barbaric society. And you don't let barbaric behavior into a civilized society. It's inadmissible. Now, for the bronze standard, I bring attention to India and China, who have no first use policies. And how many people here are worried about a nuclear war when India and China have scuffles on their border? Nobody worries about it because they have no first use policies. It's not going to escalate to nuclear war. Unfortunately, that's not the case in Ukraine. Now, where does that put the Hiroshima vision? And I had to say substandard. Because the best they could do was reiterate our position that threats by Russia of nuclear weapons use in the context of aggression against Ukraine are inadmissible. So threats that aren't in the context of Ukraine are admissible, or anyone else's threats are admissible, such as the nuclear policies of NATO since its foundation, which includes the initiation of nuclear war under certain circumstances. So I'm disappointed, which I guess is the thing. I suppose it could have been worse, but the trend is bad. And we need to have a strategy for reversing it. So by the time we go back to New Delhi for another round of the G20, the nuclear weapon states, including Russia, not just the three that were here, are feeling the heat that they have to stop making threats and they have to acknowledge that they will not use nuclear weapons. As as the UN Secretary General came here asking them to say without success. So I would like to hear what the trends are in these fields, other fields. Was this bad and getting worse, or bad with an up chance of getting better, or good but backsliding, and so on? So it's a snapshot is one thing, but to put it in the context of the history and future is another thing.
Thanks, Aaron, for your comprehensive remarks and also your comments on the trend. So I'd like to ask all the speakers to answer his questions on
Sort of do
the trend.
Trend upward,
Trend going up, going down, and also how you think that you can empower your colleagues in Japan for the future G7 discussions. Starting from.
I mean, for the nuclear disarmament group, as you said, I think the trend is worse, especially if you're just looking at the G7 statement.
Yeah.
However, more generally, if you look at the nuclear disarmament field, I think the fact that the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons came into force has empowered some of the civil society organizations working in the field. So as civil society organization, I think we shouldn't just be bound to this particular outcome and look at more widely what kind of concrete action we can take in particular at their respective country in terms of pushing the nuclear disarmament as in the forward.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, it's hard to say just one short answer, but from my perspective of climate change, I think that climate change and environmental issues have been getting more complicated because we need to consider the synergies between the environmental issues and the other social and economic issues. For example, currently I'm working on the climate and gender issues. So now Actually, I'm the W20 delegate in India, Japanese delegate in India. And so, most of people don't recognize how these two issues connected, related. So nobody just, particularly in Japan, even most of people hardly recognize the relationship between that. So now, recently, I cooperate with other NGOs, and so, for example, like Nagashima-san, she's the expert of gender, so, and so, or the members from W7. So, so maybe if we can cooperate more, maybe it's, maybe we can just how do you say, establish a good trend for the COP20 towards the COP28. But if we working the separately, maybe we cannot solve these more complicated issues. I'm not sure it's the answer for your questions, but hopefully the trend is getting better in the future. So slightly, sometimes purpose. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, Shoko.
Okay, so as for the economic issues, the trend is, I think, going worse. Yeah, because there are so many issues related to the economic issues, and it's very much complicated. So the single policies cannot solve it. Yeah, and as I talk, these issues are, these problems are the result of the more than 50 years economic globalizations, mainly formulated by the G7 countries, rich countries. So they, so G7 countries should ask the global South, with their calling the countries global South. Yeah. And as for the question from really, it's important for all of us to each issues make my issue. Yeah, my issue. They feel it's or it is the issue related to myself. Yeah, so we have to discuss much more how to make us the kind of sort of kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and so next, Masaki, and also Yuko and Hiro. All of you will use in total 5 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes. 130 minutes.
Yeah, just quickly. Yeah, and the trend is downward, unfortunately. And especially on the pandemic preparedness and response issues. It is because that everybody says that even G7 says that we cannot take the way of the panic and neglect. But unfortunately, we are now going to the neglect phase. And COVID-19 is not so long ago, and it has been and still affected the many people, and also many people are dying by the COVID-19 and also other related diseases. So that we cannot forget the COVID-19, but we are forgetting now. And we are going to more geopolitical issues like Ukraine and Russia. But Ukraine and Russia were two countries which were most affected by COVID-19 2 years ago. And also on HIV/AIDS and multi-drug resistance TB. These two countries are most affected countries in East Asia, Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And for example, Russia have more than 1 million, people living with HIV/AIDS. And also Ukraine, and it has the 250,000 people living with HIV/AIDS, but they forget HIV/AIDS, unfortunately. So, so this is a very much difficult point, and so that these kind of two deeply affected countries of HIV/AIDS, TB, COVID-19 were fought each other, fighting each other. It is a very serious problem, and the global and the world forgetting this issue, and let these countries kind of fight each other. So this is a very much tragedy, I think. And also other issue that how say on the pandemic treaty and how say the international health regulation negotiations. It is a global negotiation. They are global negotiation, but it is dominated by only by the experts, and no one interested in this kind of negotiation process. And the people has been going more and more for the conspiracy side. So this is a very much difficult point. So that we need to emphasize the more transparency, more accountability, and also more participatory approach for these kind of countries, and also WHO and other international institutions to prevent people going to prevent people from going to the conspiracy, and also that how say that people should face the reality, and also that fight against the real enemy. It is very much important. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, the next people, please.
Quickly. Well, I would say slowly improving. That is simply because most of humanitarian actors is believing we cannot afford another failure or another setback. It's really, link of the crisis. So that's why. So we really need to change this. That's why we're trying to improve in that's the one. And also the empowerment for civil society. Well, it's not easy to answer, but I think as he mentioned, we cannot do, one person cannot change so that, the empower someone. For my organization, Japan Platform is focusing humanitarian action. It's normally, we don't do advocacy. We only doing, providing assistance. So we normally work with other advocacy people. So this is first time for us to work as other advocacy organization, but this is a really good learning opportunity for us. I think we just continue to work, involving other actors and work together and influencing others. So probably that might be the one way to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Hiro.
Yeah, thank you. I think the trend is maybe stagnated. It wasn't great to begin with, but it hasn't been that bad, I'd say. The point I think I want to highlight here is that I think very interesting to see many progressive people in the different sector would think very in a Western way when it's come to open society. And from that angle, we start to say, well, the things are getting worse. But I think we just need to have a bit more nuanced understanding of the different cultures and different decision-making processes, which we tend not to do, and impose a very liberal understanding of the things. So with that, it's very hard to say this is going bad. I think for many African countries, I think their space is getting much bigger in the global architecture, and then their say has been way bigger. So that's absolutely fantastic. On the other, the countries used to have a lot of access, didn't have access anymore, like Japan, and we really, Japanese CSO started to have very limited space, not just domestically, but globally too. So it's, overall, I think we just need to be a bit more nuanced in a sense. And yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that's the global trend. I think some countries are doing, some groups, some regions are doing great. Some regions are not doing great. I think Western are quite failing on that front. In Japanese society, civil society point, I had to highlight that I think what she just mentioned was really good. We have a lot of great NGOs, great civil society working on the ground. We need more multilateralist thinking and approaches to be mainstream here. Otherwise, we will not get big issues to be solved. Financial architecture, health architecture, environmental regime, we're not gonna fix it without addressing root causes and the big problem. It's without, I don't think it's needed to name, but I think it's very clear the rich dominate the space and they are the one causing a lot of problem. Unless we start to tackle those, no single issue will be solved. So I think if the question of can we be united, can we be consolidated around that single big issue, I think that's going to be critical.
Thanks. Can we also invite a short comment from Hiroki and Maruko, then we can conclude. Short comment. And Sumiko will help you. Sumiko can help you. So in Japanese. No, Sumiko. 日本語で OK。
はい、
English for Japanese.
さっきの両方の質問に答えます。はい、今回私は先ほどの市民の目線で、この G7 サミットを市民にとってはいい機会になったと思っています。で岸田総理 G7 サミットで出た首脳宣言に対しては、私も雨レインの評価です。ただこのプロセスを通して市民社会のエンパワーメントも高まりましたし、市民が学ぶ機会にもなりました。はい、なので、あとは特に広島にとって核の問題に関して、私はずっと被爆者の方だったり、智子さんの背中を入れてきたので、今度は私たちはその核だけではなく他のイシューも含めて、同時に取り組んでいくっていうのが、自分たちの世代の、責務であって役割であるかなと思っているので、それをやっていきたいと思います。
I'm going to answer both questions in one go. In terms of citizens' participation, as I said earlier, I think it was a very good opportunity for us citizens to be involved in this process. But however, for the G7 communique that have come out, like others, I have to rate as brain. But again, the process has been very empowering for the civil society organization, and the civil society organizations have learned a lot from this process. And in particular for Hiroshima, nuclear issues is a big thing. And I myself have been working with and learning from Hibakusha and people like Tomoko-san. And I think it's the responsibility of us, the next generation, to carry on working on nuclear issues and other issues.
Thanks, Hiroki, and thanks, Sumiko, for your help. And finally, Mariko.
Well, just briefly, in terms of the overall trend, about the engagement of the civil society organization into the government work or policy organizations, I think we are making some progress. We are, I think it's fair to say we have a vast improvement when we look back like 10 or 20 years ago. And there are so many shared keywords now, like inclusive or human rights or participatory movement, or whatever. So there are so many things that we can share right now. But one thing I would like to say is that we also have to be critical to ourselves. If we are saying that we need to have a strategy to empower the civil society more and more, I think we need to know how we can reach out more people in the society, on the real ground. Probably what we are talking about right now in this meeting doesn't really, well communicated to the for example, the students in the school, or my mother or father, or even myself, unfortunately. So we need to know that the words that we can communicate so that more people can understand what we are talking about and they want to involve in this process. That I have to put up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And this is the end of the system final press conference. And from 4 o'clock, we welcome Saro-san for the press conference in the other room. So we conclude this press conference, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.